Dinky is a podcast where two pals just won't shut the F up about being child-free and the dink lifestyle. I'm Erica, and I don't have kids because I guess my kink is having people on the internet just slander me day and night, both for my decision to be child-free and for every other decision I ever made.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm Kristen, and I don't have kids because, wow, I just dinked myself so many times in the last week with so many things that I just wouldn't have been able to dink myself without kids or with kids. So I'm taking advantage of that as my reason today.
Nice little dink yourself teaser right there. A little plug.
Yeah, there you
gotta
go.
Stay tuned for the dink yourself. Love it. Well, we recently asked listeners to send questions for a child-free therapist without revealing who that child-free therapist was, specifically a South Asian child-free therapist. And damn, you guys turned up with some great fucking questions. Our guest today is Israa Nasir, a psychotherapist, speaker, and founder of the digital mental health brand Well Guide on Instagram. Israa was born in Pakistan and was raised between Saudi Arabia and Toronto, but she's also lived in the Middle East, South Asia, and the United States. This, along with her mixed cultural identity, has given her a unique perspective on the challenges of cross-cultural experiences and life transitions. We should also just mention she's child-free in case you didn't pick that up. Her work on mental health has been featured in Business Insider, NBC News, Teen Vogue, and so many more. Plus, her new book, Toxic Productivity, Reclaim Your Time and Emotional Energy in a World That Always Demands More, comes out in November of 2024 and is available for pre-order now. We're so excited to chat with her. The conversation is phenomenal. But first, we gotta dink ourselves.
Dink ourselves.
A dink is a dual income, no kid household, so naturally we're making bad choices with our disposable income. In this weekly segment, we chat through the frivolous and ridiculous purchases or hobbies that we couldn't afford if we had kids. Kristen, I can't wait to hear your dink yourself because you really have alluded to it strongly.
Yep. If you can hear this, people, I'm flipping through my list here, my recorded list of all of the dink myself. Who's ready?
What the fuck?
What? I have a list.
Do you really?
Well, yeah, I just wrote a few things down just now.
Do you have a dink yourself journal? We should make a dink yourself journal.
Wow. The ideas of monetizing things for Dinky just never ends.
Dink yourself daily, and it's just like you can write down one way you dink yourself every day.
I dinked myself. I actually like that. That's like positive affirmations, you know?
Yeah, we got to do that. Okay.
Maybe we'll include
write that down.
And yeah. Add it to the other list that we have of ongoing ideas. Okay, so in honor of our guest today, a child-free therapist, I do want to mention that I have started therapy.
Hell yeah.
And I have been putting it off for a long time because it's so expensive, and you can't justify it a lot of times when you're like trying to pick between mental health and other things. So I finally just said, you know what, I need to do this. I'm like going through some huge life changes in terms of like maybe career, maybe where I live. Like I'm kind of like, going through it. So it was time. So I think from a time perspective, I have to be there at like 4:00 every week. And she's also specializes in parenting therapy, by the way. So I have to give up my slot pretty soon because it's a prime slot for children. She does a lot of children's therapy, and it's like an after school time that works for kids.
Wait, so she's giving you the boot to prioritize a child?
I mean, yeah. But I understand.
I actually hate this. Dump her.
No, she's great. I will say she's great. But, and I do understand.
Yeah, you're so nice.
But anyway, I'm very glad that I prioritized therapy. It's been helpful. And luckily, I have a new insurance plan through my husband's work. And I have been shocked that my therapy is like $20. Not to brag, but like,
holy
what
shit.
The hell? And never in my entire life has therapy been this cheap. So
wow.
That's on my husband having like a government kind of job. So yay.
That's incredible. The cheapest I've ever had for therapy is $40. So $20 is bananas.
Yeah. 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 And my husband's also going to therapy too. So we're just a therapy household right now.
I love that.
And it's heavenly. So that's item number 1. I'll just go through 2 more.
Take all the time you need.
Okay. I'm just trying to, get through it. Another thing is I've been donating to GoFundMe's a lot. This is like something that like I think is an addiction that I have been doing for years, of just like a random person on the internet has a GoFundMe and I'm like, oh, like I'll just like justify like, $20 here and there kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that more recently. So I spent $40 in the last couple of weeks just with random GoFundMes. One that I really want to plug is and maybe you saw this, Erica, on the Oregonian, which is where we had our article printed. There was a Columbia Gorge Humane Society that was scammed by someone. And rule number 1, people, when somebody emails you and says, give me your username and password for a website, never, ever, ever do that. So apparently somebody was posing as Chewy and was like, oh, like we're Chewy, we're an animal company, for those who don't know, like a pet company, and like we're going to help the Humane Society. If you give us like your username and password, we'll like hook you up somehow.
What the fuck?
And I don't know. And so somebody at the Humane Society provided it, and then now they're hacked, and now they've been posting fake puppies and kittens and collecting money. The scammers have been collecting money. And now the Humane Society can't get back into their account. Meta is like not helping them anymore. And so they were like, all of our followers, I think they had like 80,000 followers or something on their Humane Society Facebook page. They can't get access to any of them. So they're like, all of our fundraising, all of our ability to like collect any money for these animals in the shelter is gone. And so anyway, if you guys have extra money to spare,
holy shit.
Feel free to consider the GoFundMe of the Columbia Gorge Humane Society in Oregon. I donated $30.
Love that.
But
yeah, we'll put that in the show notes.
What fucking criminals, like what fucking pieces of shit to scam a Humane Society rescue? Like,
I was just thinking,
I'm not kidding. Those people should be on death row. They 100% should be like, I don't care. You guys are so sick that you're going to, they're literally responsible potentially for the death of animals. That to me is fucking psycho. That's psychopathic.
How much do you want to bet that actually the GoFundMe was also started by the scammers?
Yeah. And they had a front page article of the Oregonian also by scammers.
They've gotten into the Oregonian mainframe.
Yes. So that is my second one. And my last one is I joined a volunteer organization with my husband that's local in our community that helps underserved children. And so, yeah, a lot of my Dink Myselfs have been like volunteer help.
She's a good person. She's working on herself. She's serving the community.
A good person, bad person. I have such a feeling about labels about that. But I'm working on myself and I'm working on trying to better the community. So there's that. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Whew. All right. How have you dinked yourself?
Sorry, I just had my brain collapsed.
What's happening?
I was thinking earlier about something I wanted to talk about and then I got distracted, but I'll just go into mine. Okay, what I'm calling my dink myself is I'm calling it Float Mania 2024. You may know that I love water. I love being in a body of water. I love being, not in a body of water. I don't like to be in an ocean, but I do love to be in a boat. I love to be in a pool. I love to be in a lake. I love it. And recently, my husband found there's a river in Oregon that's fairly shallow because also I'm not a strong swimmer.
Yeah.
So I'm always worried. And also there was a recent person who drowned floating in the Willamette. So I've been a little scared.
Willamette River, for those who don't know.
And so I've always been a little scared of like new water activities. But he went and he tried a river float that's about 3 hours long. The water's very shallow.
3 hours?
I know. Are you saying that as that's good or that's bad?
I think that's a long time to float, but it's been a while since I floated.
It's the perfect amount.
Okay.
I honestly could maybe do it twice in a day, but we haven't done that yet. We talked about maybe one day going early, doing it once, driving back, doing it again, and then being done. But 6 hours might be a lot. But literally from the moment that we got into the water and started floating, I was like, this is what my life is supposed to be. Going down a river in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, watching the animals, watching the birds, having a little beer. If anyone from the government is listening, we didn't drink beer. Just theoretically. So then we went the following week, and we haven't been able to go again because it's been too cold. But
this is Float Mania. Yeah.
This is Float Mania. And if I could get in a couple more times this year, I'm gonna. Are
there like other people on the river with you?
There are other people on the river. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was going to say, I know that there are people who are going to be like, you can do that with kids. It's not the same fucking experience.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you define busy. I mean, like, you definitely see other people. We've been once on a Friday and we've been on a Saturday. The Saturday was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But the Friday was like perfect. And my husband's been once on a Thursday and he said it was pretty empty.
I would rather be with people.
You would?
Know, like, I don't want to be like crowded, but I like the idea like this is not like something you're doing that's dangerous enough that nobody's doing it, you know?
But here's the thing. It's almost zero. I mean, I don't want to say 0% chance, because obviously anything can happen. Almost every part of the river, you can see the bottom. Like, I think it's probably like 2 to 3 feet deep. So
wow, this is my kind of float.
That's what I'm saying. We got to get you out there. It's literally the perfect experience.
Yeah.
It's the best. It's all I want to do. I wish I could quit my job and just float every day. I think that's what I was destined for.
Yeah. All right. We'll add that to the dinky list of business ideas.
Thank
Float
you.
River Company.
Kristen, I do want to talk to you about one thing, because we referenced this in the actual episode. So listeners, when you get to this part, you'll understand. But I do want to have a transparent conversation with you on the pod about your fucking guilt issues.
Oh my God. What?
Listeners,
is
you
this
need
a
to know.
bonus content? What is this for?
No. This is going to be a dink yourself. Okay. Listeners, Kristen is out of fucking control, and I need your help. We want this to be our jobs. We want to make Dinky our jobs. And there's a lot of complications with that. A, we don't want to sell you guys garbage. We don't want to rely on a sponsorship by Walmart.com or a sponsorship by some other fucking company that has $1 million, you know?
Mm-hmm. We don't? Okay.
No, because I don't want to make garbage content. I want to make fun content.
Well, but I buy things from Walmart, so
yeah,
you know.
And I have a lot of problems with that. I don't want to sell you.
I know it's controversial.
Yeah, I don't want to sell you BetterHelp ads.
Okay, fine, fair.
Okay,
I don't want to do BetterHelp either.
Yeah, fuck BetterHelp. Go to therapy, but not BetterHelp. Anyway, a huge struggle in Kristen and my relationship in making this a legitimate business is Kristen feels so guilty about anything. Honestly, I would not be surprised if Kristen told me that she feels guilty that you guys listen to this podcast. She's rolling her eyes right now. But in the last week, at least 3, maybe up to 5 times, she's told me she feels guilty about things. Oh, I feel guilty about releasing a Patreon. That's a totally optional thing for people to subscribe to because they want to support the show. I feel guilty about selling merch, which we make like no money on merch. They're basically coming and slapping us in the face whenever we sell merch. Don't even get me started on the taxes for merch. We have never made a dime of profit for ourselves on this show yet. Everything has gone back into the business. And yet Kristen still feels guilty for every attempt we make to make any fucking money to pay our expenses. And I have been begging Kristen to talk to her therapist about this. So Kristen, first question. Have you spoken to your therapist about the guilt that you feel? Oh no, you froze. Or I froze.
Yeah, I froze because the world stopped because it hated that question so much.
Yeah.
I've worked on guilt a lot in the past. And now I'm in a good place. This is the good place of me with guilt.
This is the good place?
Yes. I have worked on guilt for years, dude. This is the good version of me that you're saying.
Oh my God.
So nice trying to guilt me into talking to my therapist about guilt when you didn't even know that I've talked about guilt.
I still
for
think you
years.
need to talk to your therapist about guilt.
Years. Well, maybe you should talk to your therapist about feeling a little bit more guilt. How about that?
What? I don't feel guilty at all. You know why? Because we've given these people.
That's the problem.
We've given people 2 years of free content, and all we're saying is, hey, I don't want to work 2 jobs anymore. Is that unethical to say?
No, it's not. I have come around. I have accepted it. Didn't I accept it? Didn't I say I was fine with the Patreon? I said that. Our merch really is marketing. That's all it is. It's free marketing. So when somebody wears the shirt, they can talk about it with a friend or whatever. So we're not getting any money really profiting from it. A couple bucks is usually our margins. But I just know times are hard. I know times are tough for everybody.
We're not putting a gun to anybody's head and saying, hey, you got to buy this cheese grotto. Hey, you got to do this and that. If I was doing that, then yeah, maybe feel guilty. Okay. Then so the second thing I wanted to say is, listeners, just know, if there's ever a point where you're like annoyed by, let's say, Cheese Grotto partnership, if you're annoyed by our Amazon storefront, if you're annoyed by our Patreon, you can tell us. We'll try to dial it back. But ultimately, we can't keep doing this podcast if we're not making any money.
I mean, it's a great question.
It's so expensive.
Yeah. And we were really fortunate to have the Childfree Well sponsorship.
Yeah, huge.
That sustained us for 6 months and paid for our... Literally, all we asked for from the sponsorship was to cover our expenses.
Yeah.
So it paid for our expenses. And I think maybe at the end, we ended up padding it a little bit to invest a little bit more back into the business, which is how we got new designs for merch and things like that. But, we can't be just doing this forever for free. I wonder how everybody else does it. How does everybody else start a podcast and do it for years?
They talk about things that are not stigmatized by culture.
Yeah.
And so that
Nordstrom.com was...
I don't think they're making money, bro. I really don't think they're making money.
They're really doing it out of the goodness of their hearts.
Yeah. And so you know what? We got another listener asking questions, because she wanted to start her own podcast. And so I do just want us to be transparent. Because people think, oh, you have 80,000 followers on social media. You guys are probably making bank. Bitch, no, we are not.
Literally nothing.
We don't make anything.
And that's not to discredit people who have donated, though. I do, some people are really great monthly supporters of the show. And I will say, Erica and I have not had to go into our own pockets since the Childfree Well sponsorship. So thank God we're not paying for it. It's paying for itself right now. But now that sponsorship has ended, so we're going to, that's where the Patreon comes back in.
Yeah.
Yada, yada, yada. But we appreciate all of the donations.
Totally. So far. And I just want us to, recognize, shoot, what was I just going to say?
This is the good quality content you're getting, guys, when you pay money.
Yeah. When you listen to these ads about somebody who told us.
What did I want to say to the podcast?
Yeah. No, I think the last thing I was going to say was this is a community. And if you're donating to the show, we really are truly very grateful. Whenever we have the Patreon and that launches, and you join it, just know that you're doing that because you believe in this. We rely, as child-free content creators, we do rely on the community more than any other type of content creator because it's so much harder for us to get sponsorships,
brands,
who want to buy into it, which is fine. I mean, like I said, I don't want to sell you garbage.
Right.
But that requires sacrifice, small amounts of sacrifice, sometimes large amounts of sacrifice from our listeners. And we do really appreciate it. It makes us feel, it makes Kristen feel guilty, but it makes me feel really happy that you guys are willing to be part of this community.
Yes.
Just know you're keeping Kristen up at night.
+1. No, I understand. This is ultimately, I think people can understand this podcast does require a lot of work. Our social media requires a lot of work. And we don't have a salary, even though we have 80,000 followers on social media. You would think that would give us something, but we've only ever had the one sponsorship from Childfree Wealth. So
yeah,
here we are. What I wanted to say was we're also expanding. So beyond Patreon, which will be launching soon, we're also talking about events. There's an event in Portland coming up. For those who haven't signed up, you can message us if you have questions about where to find any information. In October, this is 2024, in case you're listening to this 3 years from now. And we're hoping to do more events.
And more trips, hopefully, maybe.
Trips, yes. We also want to maybe branch into more trips, whether it's with a partner like Trova, like our Switzerland trip, or maybe even doing some of our own hosted trips. We're talking about what that would look like.
All right, that's all I wanted to say. I think it's time to get into the fucking interview.
I think so too.
Yay! Well, thank you so much for being here, Israa. We're so excited to chat with you. And I have to just let you know, first thing, we did listener questions for this episode. Like, we sourced questions from our audience. People were through the roof excited for us to talk to a therapist. It's like been one of our most requested episodes. They had 1 million questions. So I'm very excited to chat with you, and we may need to have you back in the future.
I am so thrilled to hear that. I think that we just don't talk about this enough. It's just starting to be talked about. I'd love to come back and talk as much as possible about this.
Yay. Perfect. Well, let's go ahead and just dive in. I would love to hear first and foremost, like, when did you realize that you didn't want to have kids? And did your work in mental health influence that decision at all?
Somebody asked me this question actually just 2 days ago. So this is like an opportune conversation. I actually don't remember a specific moment that I was like, this is what I'm doing. What I can say is I don't have any early memories of wanting to be a parent. So I don't remember ever being a little girl and imagining getting married and having a kid. I don't remember ever, in grade school, you do those like MASH. Maybe I'm like dating myself, but you do the thing with your crushes and you're like, oh, I'm going to grow up and have 2 babies and we're going to name them this, that, and the other. I just don't remember that as ever being a part of my life. And I think it was just like, even up in high school, going into university, thinking about the future, like being a parent was just like never in the realm of imagination. And I think it was really in undergrad when it solidified as a thing. I think for a long time, I just kept thinking that maybe when I'm older, this is just something I'll think about when I'm older. Like this will just come to me when I'm older. But I think it was in undergrad where I was like, you know what? I just don't think this is a thing. Like I've never felt it. And the second part of your question, no, I don't think my work in mental health has influenced this decision because it predates it. And, a lot of my imagination play was very much centered around adventure, being an explorer. I wanted to be a marine biologist. I wanted to work as a journalist for National Geographic. So it was all this like adventure-y stuff. So my imagination never had anything like domesticated, if you will, in it.
Yeah, totally. I love that.
Yeah, I just never thought about it.
Where did you fall? Like, do you have siblings?
So I'm the middle child.
Okay, interesting.
Middle child, but also the eldest daughter.
Okay.
In a South Asian immigrant family, Pakistani Muslim. So I'm sure there's stuff there, right? So I can definitely say that there were some like pivotal moments that made it more like pushed me like deeper in the groundedness of this decision. I don't want to create any causal relationships between my childhood and my decision, but I will say that my sister got a little sick when we were younger, and that was very traumatic for my whole family. I saw my parents in like a lot of pain. I must have been 5. She was just around 1. It was temporary, but at that time we didn't know what it was. So it was all like, everybody was like very scared that this was like going to be a bad outcome. So my parents were really in pain. I have a very distinct memory of my dad crying on the prayer mat. And so I feel like that really changed my relationship with my younger sister. And I'm kind of like a mini mom to her. She jokes that she's my only kid. And she's literally only 4 years younger than me. So I feel like there's a little bit of that, right? Like that there's so much pain in being a parent. And I feel like maybe that's some things that settled in early for me where I was like, man, this doesn't feel like a thing I want to take on. I've always seen moms being very stressed. I think my mom was very stressed when I was growing up, right? She was a working mom, so a lot going on in her life. Maybe that has something to do with it. So I feel like there's other things that might have influenced that a little bit more instead of my work.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, just being aware enough to like take in those observations and form critical thoughts around, should I do this? Everybody else's stress is pretty wise for a younger person.
Yeah, sometimes you just like absorb things you observe, but you're not able to articulate it until you're older.
Right. I'm curious to talk to you about changing your mind. Erica and I both wanted kids initially, but we've changed our minds. And we've also had friends who are child-free and ended up having kids. What would you want to say to listeners in terms of how to cope with these types of changes?
I actually don't remember a time at all where I was considering becoming a parent. And I definitely make a distinction between people who want children and people who want to be parents, right? There is a difference in that intention. But for somebody who is going through like a transition of opinion on this or anything in life, I think I always like to remind people that we are allowed to change. We grow as our life changes, our circumstances change. And when we get too fixated on a perspective that we have about ourselves, we actually limit our own growth. And we don't have to be beholden to values and ideas of a past self because our circumstance was different, right? Maybe you had an idealistic perspective of the world when you were younger and you were like, you know what, I would love to have children and a home and a dog. But you grew up and you realize that those are things that don't interest you anymore. So you're allowed to shed that. I think it's painful if you've already like made the decision and then you want to change your mind. I think that can be a very painful place for somebody. But I think we should allow ourselves the grace to be seasonal. We're not supposed to be permanently the same throughout our life. You know, even our personality traits change. People always say that personality is like forever, but it's scientifically not. We have some temperamental traits that remain the same throughout life, but everything else is up for change.
Wait, I want to go back to something you said at the very beginning when you were talking about like the difference between wanting to have children and be a parent. Can you speak a little bit more to like that, how you see that being different?
Yeah. So the way I see it, right? There are some people who love kids and they want to be around kids and they just want to have kids because they love children, right? Other people want to actually be parents. Like they want to have the lifestyle. They understand that having a child means shedding my old life. And like, I feel like when you want to be a parent, you are actually a better parent. So for me, like, I love kids. I love hanging around them. I think they're so insightful. I think they can be a reminder of a lot of things that we miss as we become older and life gets busy. But I don't want to be a parent. Like, I don't hate kids. I just don't want to be a parent. I don't want that lifestyle. I don't want that responsibility. And so I think that's a distinction for me because I know some people in my life who are like, I have always wanted children, but they've never thought about what that would do to their life. They've never actually considered what it takes to be a parent, right? And not everybody can be a parent. That's a controversial statement, but I don't think everybody is meant to be a parent.
Totally. No, I love that you say that. And I feel like my lifelong frustration is like, how do we make that a social norm, like a discussion that we have as a society of like, there's a difference, you know, and you don't have to have children if you don't really want to be a parent.
Yeah. And I think like I try to talk about it a lot when people ask me. And a lot of times people just assume that women who don't have children like hate kids, that they just hate the and that it can be true for some people, like, and that there's no judgment or shame in that. But I take that opportunity to talk about this distinction. I'll always jump in because people assume that I'm not maternal or whatever, and I hate children. And I'm like, no, like that's not actually true. What is true is I don't want the lifestyle.
Yeah. One listener wrote in and asked a question that I thought was really poignant. She said, how do you get rid of the guilt you feel from not meeting your family or society's expectations of having kids? And for context, she wrote, I'm 39 years old, happily married for 6 years, and I love being child-free. I've never wanted kids, and the prospect of being a mother fills me with dread. And yet I still feel like I waffle from time to time because I am a people pleaser who feels like I should do it. What would you say to this listener?
I think that's a very common experience. I think it's something that I've definitely felt myself. You know, I come from a collective culture, you know, parental obligations and expectations are really valued in my community, right? And so we're raised to meet our parents' expectations. And it is, I think, like a really big deal for a lot of families to have one person make that decision. And it can feel like, you know, you're letting down a lot of people. And what I would say to somebody who is experiencing guilt is to experience it. You have to just feel the guilt. Like you don't have to act to alleviate it. Having a child to not feel guilty is just the worst reason to have a kid, right? And you're not going to be happy. And I'm not saying this person is going to do that, but sometimes we feel like because we have a negative emotion, we have to do something to get rid of it. But you just have to let it pass through you. And you have to realize that our emotions are kind of like waves. They're going to come and they're going to go, or they're like seasons. They're going to come and they're going to go. Some days you might feel very grounded in your decision and you'll feel good. Other days you might be like, damn, my mom is the only one in her friends who doesn't have grandkids. And that'll make you feel sad. And so just allow that. Let yourself feel it. Because if you try to change it, you're going to get into a battle with it. And then you're at war with yourself. And then you're just going to feel bad. And then what's going to happen is you're going to displace that anger on your family. You're going to say, my family is making me feel bad. So, and then that's going to create conflict, right? And so allowing yourself to feel the guilt, I think journaling can be a really powerful thing. Accessing some empathy for yourself, reminding yourself why you made this decision. All of this like self-talk does need to happen. And it's okay to have self-talk. I think I've worked with people who say things like, why do I have to be the one who's doing the work? Like, why am I doing the self-talk? Why am I doing the journaling? Like, my mom's not doing it. She's just doing whatever she wants. And to that I say is because it's your responsibility to take care of yourself. All right. Like, and people hate hearing it. But it's the same for me too, right? Like, I have to take responsibility for my emotions. And when I do feel guilty about it, because I do, I just, journal it. I talk myself through it. I call a friend. I care for myself. And the more you fill your life with things you love, the guilt becomes smaller. It feels less heavy.
How does that sit with you, Erica?
I know that's the correct answer, but I hate that answer because I hate feeling guilt more than anything. So I am feeling guilt for this listener.
No, but guilt is a very normal, natural reaction to this.
Totally.
Right? And especially sometimes our family will really try to activate it within us, especially if you come from a family that's up in each other's business, right? Especially like your parents feel like they have a lot of say in this decision. My mom will always talk to me about it, right? Sometimes she's mad, sometimes she's compassionate, sometimes she's like trying to be progressive and saying I should get a surrogate, right? Like, so she's like always trying all of these angles. Yeah. She will quote like Bollywood actresses who have had surrogates and she'll say, look, like, well, Priyanka Chopra did it. So like, you can do it too. And so she's like trying all angles. So it feels, right? You feel it and it gets activated, but you can't allow guilt to make you feel bad about yourself, because guilt is an emotion that demands action, because guilt says you're doing something wrong. And if you let guilt live, it becomes shame, which becomes you are wrong. And so we don't want that, right? We don't want to let guilt live. We want it to breeze through us and continue to fill our own resilience so that we can bolster against it.
Wow. I'm so glad we have this recorded.
She can go back and play it again. As an aside, Erica has told me recently in particular, she said, I'm sick of hearing about your guilt. You've said that to me like 3 times in like the last week.
Yeah. No, truly. Kristen
so now
feels
I'm
guilty
play this
about
back.
everything. Yeah. Kristen's like feels guilty that we do this podcast. She feels guilty that we ask people to like pay us for the podcast. I'm like, girl, you gotta get this under control.
I'm like, Erica, it's gonna turn into shame soon. I gotta fix it. We gotta talk through it.
Yeah. And, like guilt is like a very controlling emotion. It can really it influences your decisions a lot. And I think if you can really just label it, if you can just be like, I'm feeling guilty right now, instead of letting it like become part of you, you can actually create distance from it. And so when my mom will call me and she'll say things randomly at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, I'll put the phone down and I literally just take 2 seconds to be like, okay, I am feeling guilty right now, but my decisions belong to me. If she's sad about something, that's on her to fix, right? Like you just have to like talk yourself through it.
Yeah, I love that.
I actually want to, if it's okay, Kristen, we can go back in a second, but I want to jump forward because you've been talking about your mom. On the parent note, like as a South Asian woman, like how did you approach having that conversation with your parents? And do you have any advice for listeners who might be going through that very same experience?
Yeah, this was a very interesting part of my life. I will say that. It was probably 3 years into our marriage because for the first 3 years, my mom never asked me about having kids because I think for her even she was like, okay, they're newly married, they're traveling, they're doing things, right? And then I think it was about 3 years in, she asked me one day, she was like, oh, so what's your future plan? When are you starting a family? Which is a whole different thing that I could talk about after. And I started softly. I think when you're talking to elders or especially as a South Asian woman, but I think this applies to all cultures. If you want to have a healthy conversation, it's better to start soft. Right? Start with a soft opening. And I said, I don't think that's something we want to do yet. Right? So I just kind of added that. And then periodically she would ask again and I would answer again. And over time, I made my answer more and more concrete. So it wasn't a one-time declaration because that would have absolutely ended in a fight. And the biggest reason to have the conversation in a healthy way is to preserve your own peace, to preserve your own emotional space. I do this for myself more than I do it for my mom. Right? Obviously, I don't want to hurt her, but I also don't want to get into unnecessary conflict and walk away feeling shame and guilt and not good enough and failing them and all of their sacrifices for immigrating and blah, 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 right? So for me, it was a soft opening over a period of time. It was multiple conversations, right? It was really grounding myself and not taking anything she's saying personally, remembering and reminding myself, even written in a note, on my phone, that her reaction to my decision is a result of her worldview. Her reaction to my decision is a result of her perspective, her upbringing, her culture, right? And so it was over a span of a year that we really solidified it. So now, 4 years, 3 years later, it's a very concrete thing. If she ever says it, I'll always be look, I've already told you this is not something we're doing. But it was multiple conversations. You start slow. You kind of prepare yourself ahead of time for the things that they're going to say. You know your parents, right? You know what they're like. You know the buttons they push. You know the angles they take. So you have to, right? So you have to remember that before you go into the conversation. So I already knew what my mom was going to say, right? At different points of the conversation, she brought up different things that I was already prepared for. So the biggest thing I'll say to somebody is prepare for this conversation. Do not go in blind. Do not go in making a declaration because that's going to end up harming you. And then also the last thing I'll say is make space for their questions. I think when you're trying to set a healthy boundary with someone who you want to have a relationship with, it's okay to allow their questions. It's okay to invite their curiosity and answer the questions. And I think that really helped my mom not be combative because I made space for her pain and her grief. I made space for that. I said, I see you're sad about this. I see that you're sad that you won't have grandkids. That must feel bad for you. What are your questions? And she asked a lot of questions. And it made me realize that this was a completely new experience for her. So she told me that she had never met a woman who did not want kids. I was the first female human that she had met in her whole 60 plus years. And this woman has lived in 4 different countries, worked in international organizations, just everything. But I was the first person she met who did not want kids. She knew many women who could not have children, right? And so they did not have children. But I was the first person. So she was like, is it a medical thing? What is this? She just didn't understand, how could it be? And then she had a phase where it was is it because I was a bad mom? Which she was not, right? So there was a little bit of grief for her there. And then she was like, is your marriage okay? She just didn't understand why somebody wouldn't do this. And most recently she's like, oh, are you guys having an open marriage? Is that why you don't have kids?
Mom.
Is Frost having an affair? It's just she's just so many different things because it's hard for her to understand that this is a choice that a woman can make because her definition of woman is connected to motherhood.
Sure.
100%. All of that resonates so much. Yeah.
Yeah. I wrote an article about how to talk to your Asian parents about mental health that I wrote a couple of years ago during COVID for Self magazine. all of those tips apply to this discussion as well. So I can send it to you and you can link it in the thing. And this is not even a plug. Like, it's literally a really great piece on how you can build this emotional safety for yourself. And I think that's really important. If you have a unstable relationship with your parents, if you're not very close, or if you tend to get into a lot of conflicts with them, I would take a different approach. I would first understand myself, like, why do I even need to have this conversation with them? Do I need to open a dialogue, or is it easier or better or safer for me to just make a statement instead, right? If you don't have emotionally mature parents, or if your parents are little, like, emotionally unstable, inviting a conversation might be even more harmful and might be even cruel, right? Sometimes parents can get like that. And so you also have to know your parents a little bit and understand, like, your own motivation as to why you want to tell them.
I'm going to transition now back to kind of relationships with friends. So one of the things we hear a lot from our listeners is around the struggle to deal with the way friendships transition when one friend has kids and the other does not. How would you advise people to navigate friendship transitions and the juxtaposition of being happy for your friend while also being child-free?
Yeah.
Oh, that eye roll was heavy.
This is a really hard one. And I think this is something that I have periodically struggled with a lot. I had friends who had children when we were in our early 20s. So this began really early for me. Like, I'm in like my mid 30s right now. I've seen the cycle at least 3 times now. And there's a lot of crashing and burning, and you learn a lot and all those like good things. But this is hard. This one is very hard. And this might even be equally as difficult, if not more, than telling your parents about it. Because, with your friends, you're kind of expecting different things than your parents, right? Your friends are your ride or dies, like all of that stuff. So I think that, when friends have kids, one of the reasons friendships can really, delineate if one person doesn't have a kid and the other person does, is when people don't acknowledge the reality of the change. And, when I was younger, I was like definitely more naive, and I was like, nothing's going to change. Like, everything will be fine. But the truth is, it will change because there has been a seismic shift in one friend's life. And so you have to kind of like think about how you can allow this friendship to evolve into a different shape without losing like the emotional connection, right? That's number one. Number two is you have to realize that people will change. Sometimes it's the friend who has the child changes, their whole priority changes, their life changes. Now you have nothing in common with them, right? Sometimes the one without the child changes. Like, they're like, well, I don't want to drive to Long Island to go to a baby shower. Like, I'm not spending my Saturday, going to this faraway land to a bouncy castle for a 2-year-old's birthday, right? Like, so both friends can start losing empathy for each other. And both sets of friends can stop losing empathy for each other's lives and what is important to them. And a friendship can only survive if you name it, if you name the beast, if you talk about it, if you say, hey, things are changing. This is what's going to change in my life. And you obviously don't have a conversation like this. You have it in like a normal way, the way people talk. But you have to actually have a very candid discussion about it, and what will showing up for each other look like now, right? What is one person capable of doing and what is somebody not capable of doing? And like, you have to have this honest conversation. And the truth is, a lot of friendships don't survive this. If you don't have a very strong foundation to begin with, let's say you kind of just became work friends that became closer because you used to go on a happy hour on Wednesdays every week for 3 years. But yeah, each other's lives, and, you've met partners and stuff like that, but you don't have like a very strong emotional foundation. It's very likely that the friendship will not survive. And is that always a bad thing? Not really, right? Friendships are not meant to be forever. Like, not all friendships are meant to be forever. And sometimes we stay in unhealthy friendships because we're like BFFs forever. And your friendships will change the shape. that they're in every season of life. And you have to kind of allow that. And if you care about the relationship, both people will have to put in a lot of effort. And it's very hard.
And it sounds like, that kind of conversation requires a lot of maturity from both ends, right? To have that and like confront that and be honest about expectations. And I love like acknowledging that friendships change, that people change over time, because it's like in our culture, we just have this idea that like, once you have a friend, you can't break up with a friend. It's not like a boyfriend or a girlfriend where you can break up with them. It's a friend is grandfathered in for life. So I think that's a great, honest conversation to have.
I think too, it's like one thing that we see a lot, like if our content winds up on the wrong side of the internet and like parents or people who want to become parents see our content, if anybody talks about those kinds of things, like, oh, I don't want to, drive to Long Beach to, be at a kid's birthday party. Like people call the child-free person the bad friend. Like, oh, you're a bad friend for not supporting your friend. And I do feel like it's really important for people to understand, like, it's okay to want different things. And that doesn't make you a bad friend. Like you don't have to be the person who always bends over backwards for the other person. But yeah.
And I would counter like to those people and say, how many times are you showing up on a Tuesday night for my promotion drinks at a bar because you don't come because you can't find childcare? Are you a bad friend? Right? No, you're trying to live within your circumstance and I'm going to live within my circumstance and we'll meet in the middle. Right? This idea that, I mean, like, and I can see giving parents grace because their life has a being that they are legally obligated to care for. Like you could go to prison if you don't find childcare and you leave your kid. Like it's a big deal. It's also a very emotional thing, but I think for too long, there has been only value put on that lifestyle. And the people who don't have children are often seen as having nothing going on, having no desires of their own, having no plans. Their time is not valuable. They just have money and they can do whatever they want, whenever they want. So they must be there for me, right? There's just no emphasis put on the fact that the person who doesn't have a child is also somebody with a full life. Right. And I feel like that's changing a little bit, but there is this I guess there's like a parenting supremacy culture that we're in because the patriarchy needs that. Right. So does capitalism, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah, preach.
But coming back to the friendship thing, the last thing I'll say is I'm assuming most of your listeners are child-free by choice people. And I will say it's really important to build a community that mirrors your life. And I don't want to say that you shouldn't be friends with people who have kids or you should drop your friends the moment they have kids, but you should try to build a community for yourself that mirrors the values and the lifestyle that you have chosen, because those are the people who you will have parallel experiences with, right? Sometimes we think we have to be friends with people who are the same age as us, but I think it's more important to have friends who are in the same stage as us. Because there's a lot of life commonality. You can do things together. You can travel together, right? You can travel with your friends who have kids, but there's so much more planning. But if I want to go to Paris for a long weekend, because I live in New York and it's a 5-hour flight, and it's a Tuesday and I want to go on a Thursday, it's not my mom friend who's going to be able to do it. And that's no knock on her. But if I want to bring a friend, it's really important for me to have my own community that mirrors and who can fill my cup. So I'm not expecting all of my emotional cup to be filled by my other friend who has other priorities in life.
Can I ask how you found your friend group that mirror your values?
I am in the process of building it. And I have sought out community culture clubs in New York. So I think when I moved here 7 years ago, and I was very intentional about, just casting a really wide net of going to different places, meeting people, just putting myself out there, going to these mixers and meetups and book launches. And I would go to museums alone and I was just out there because I was I have to build a community. And the more people you meet, the higher the likelihood of meeting somebody who mirrors your lifestyle, right? So I've met a lot of people organically because I put myself out there. And, sometimes you meet people who don't want to have children, but their lives are full and they don't want a new friend, right? Like that did recently happen to me. You can't take it personally. You have to put yourself out there. You can't let rejection stop you and just like find people in that way. The other thing I'm seeing recently, which is very cool, is community clubs are popping up for people without children. So Meetup has a lot of them. There is this community in New Zealand, I think called Otherhood.
Others Club.
Yeah.
We love Danny.
She was
our
on your
friend
show,
Danny.
right?
Yes, she was just on.
Yeah. So stuff like that is also happening in New York, right? Where I live. So it's like important to you can seek that out. You could even, honestly, this is like bold, but you could go to your community bookshop, and bookshops host events for free, and just say, hey, I want to do a book club, but can we advertise it as a book club for people who don't have children, or, name it something like that. Like you can access, you could, if you have a community garden, you can put up a flyer around that. I see this stuff everywhere, just stuck on posters. But I think the common theme is you have to put yourself out there. It's not going to happen if you don't put yourself out there. But, it is a niche community. It's very hard.
Yeah, for sure.
We've talked so much about doing some kind of book club through Dinky. And I feel like we need to make it happen somehow, because people in the child-free community love to read. So maybe we'll need to talk more.
I mean, especially in New York, Portland, these are cities that are very conducive to supporting our community. So it feels like a lower hill to climb.
Yeah. I'm going to keep you posted in mine as well.
Yeah. Please do.
It's great. I do want to ask a couple more questions specifically about cultural differences. Another listener wrote in, how do you deal with the South Asian cultural expectation and lack of boundaries from others when you're child free?
Yeah. So, South Asian culture is a collectivist culture. So we have more porous boundaries, right? And there's a pro and a con to that. I don't want to sit here and knock the collectivist framework, because there's a lot of beauty and a lot of strength. We show up for each other. We don't have the issues of high rates of loneliness that individual cultures have. So there's the good. But the bad is that people don't respect your decisions. A lot of times, elders think that your decisions are not yours to make, that you are obligated to create grandkids for the grandparents, right? And so that can be a very confusing and angry space. So what I would say is, when we talk about cultural expectations, right, you really have to ask yourself, who are you living for? You have to do the inner work yourself. Expecting your mom's sister in a South Asian framework to respect your boundaries just because you've said it is a fool's errand. And I don't want to discourage people from setting boundaries, but the truth is we have to set boundaries in a different way. We have to get a little creative, because collectivist cultures, South Asian culture, we're also not direct communicators, right? We are what is known as guess culture. So people have to guess each other's feelings. There's a lot of passive communication that happens, and it's very normalized. That's the framework. And again, there's pros to it, but the con is you can't directly tell somebody to not ask you a question, right? You just can't do it. And if you do, you are inviting conflict. And if you have the emotional reserve to have the conflict, by all means, go ahead, right? But if you don't, what I would say is understand yourself, how you want to exit conversations with people who are not respecting your boundaries. So have a couple of stock phrases before you go to weddings and parties. Know to kind of shift out of the conversation when somebody brings up a topic, right? So literally cutting them off and saying, I have to go to the bathroom. Auntie, I really want to answer this, but I just really have to pee. I have to go, right? And then just making a beeline for it. Something that I used to do, especially when people were pressuring me to get married, because I was ancient when I got married. I was literally 30.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, no, I was back shelf, expired milk.
Oh my God.
And people would question. So something that I started doing is I would flip the question back and be oh, it's in God's hands, Auntie. You can pray for me, right? And then I'd be oh, it's nice to see you. And I would just leave, right? And so it's about ending the conversation and realizing that you cannot take this personally, because then you are taking on somebody else's bullshit. You're taking on someone else's emotional baggage that you don't need to carry. If they don't have good boundaries, that's not your problem to solve. Like, I'm not everyone's communal mom. I'm not going to go around trying to teach these aunties how to have boundaries and what's appropriate. Like, that's not my job. I will get wrinkles before I'm 50 if I do that, right? So what I have to do is I have to preserve my emotional energy. And if it means getting creative and getting out of that conversation, and I honestly, I still do this because people are always asking me questions about children or telling me that I'm going to change my mind. And like, will I ever experience true love if I don't have a child? Like, people say dumb shit all the time. And it's not on me to like fix everybody's like emotional baggage. So I have found a way to creatively cope with this. And I think that's what I would say to somebody who is struggling with this in like our cultural sense is have a few stock phrases, have a plan before you go in, know the people that you really want to like cut out of. And if it's like a small gathering, maybe you don't have to go. Like maybe you find a way to not go. Right? If it's, your mom who's calling you all the time, maybe not picking up in the middle of the workday, right? You have to make your own emotional boundaries when other people don't respect your boundaries.
That's great advice. I'm also still thinking about your mom saying that she had never met anybody who didn't want kids. And I just wonder how many of those women didn't want kids, but didn't feel comfortable telling her that, Mm-hmm. I wonder if that's a thing because maybe they created their own boundaries of like, this is an easier thing for me to say and for somebody to accept without further questioning.
Yep. I'm sure that is true. And I think there's perhaps a lot of women, at least within the South Asian community, who are like, my mom's generation, who didn't even know that they had a choice, that they could be like, I don't want kids. Right? Like you see so much intergenerational trauma in our community. And it makes me wonder how many of these people like actually didn't want to be a mom. And then you kind of see that in their parenting. So
yeah, that's profound. We had one question that I just found really interesting. Actually, these were two questions that I linked up because they were so connected, even though they kind of have different vibes to them. One person asked, from a clinical standpoint, what do you see in people with kids that you don't see in child-free people? And another person asks, why am I like this? What makes someone non-maternal?
Yeah, goodness. The word maternal like makes me feel a certain way. So I'll answer that after. So the idea that child-free people are clinically the way they are for some reason is making child-free people a monolith. And in the same way, people have so many different reasons to want kids. There are so many different reasons people don't want kids, right? There are some clinical components. There are some themes like around childhood trauma, right? That can really deter somebody from having kids. Being parentified at a very early age, that can really deter somebody. Having like poverty trauma, scarcity trauma, like those things can also deter people from having kids. And that can be true, right? But it can also be true that you had no trauma and you don't want to have children because you have political beliefs about it, right? You might not want to have children because you are concerned about the environment. You might not want to have children because you love freedom and money, right? Like there's just so many reasons. So there's no one clinical reason why somebody might not have children. I think if we were to do a study, because this has not been studied so far, right? I think if we were to do a study, I would perhaps hypothesize that there are some like personality traits that child-free people might be higher in. Perhaps I don't know what it would be, but like I have a feeling that somebody who is like, I'm just thinking out loud here and I can't even like come up with it, but I have a feeling that there might be some personality traits that can lead to that, but I don't think this has been studied enough. So I also believe that child-free people are not monoliths, like because people sometimes grow into it, like they become more grounded in their decision. Like for sure, like my husband, when I met him, was like ambivalent. Even by the time we got married, he was ambivalent, and now like you couldn't even convince him. Like, right?
Yeah.
Like, will he even hold a baby? I have no idea. Yeah. But this thing about maternal and non-maternal, I think, is a huge myth. That is the idea that like women are more maternal is honestly like a myth that is like a weapon of patriarchy to control women. And I don't want to get on that soapbox, but it's not. You can't talk about this without talking about that, right? And men can be maternal, because maternal is just another word for nurturing. And you can be an extremely warm, nurturing, caring person and not want to have children. I am a very nurturing person. My entire profession is nurturing other people, right? I love having gatherings. I love hosting people. And if you are my friend, I will always remember everything about you. Dietary restrictions. If we're going somewhere, like, I'm like, oh, you don't eat cheese. That person is like, just like a mom, right? But I don't want to have kids, but I have that feeling, and I put it out in the world in a different way. So I don't believe that child-free people are not nurturing people. Don't let anybody make you think that, because in the words of JD Vance, like child-free cat ladies, like, we fucking care about our cats. We buy them cute outfits. We give them good food. We take them for walks, right? Like, so this idea that you are non-maternal is just false. And there was a study done that did refute this idea that women are more maternal because they give birth. Because the idea is like, we're hormonal, there's like oxytocin, like blah, blah, blah. But there was and if I find it, I'll link it to you. But there was a study done, because
send it.
I think I sent it to 12 people. So
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't want to get into politics, but just really quick, because you brought up JD Vance, did you see the thing that recently came out about what he said about Indian women?
No. What did he say? Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. There was like this whole like clip that came out about how like one of the benefits of marrying an Indian woman was that his mother-in-law came to live with him and his family, and they were like, yeah, that's like pretty much like the whole purpose of a post perimenopausal woman. And I was just like, can we stop assigning a specific purpose to women? Like, can we not do that? Like, why do women have one purpose and men can have any purpose they want?
Yeah. You know who's also perimenopausal? Like, all of the old female politicians. Like, do you know what I mean? Like the UK, like, doctors are perimenopausal. And also, you don't have to be brown to do that. Like, Michelle Obama's mom lived with them in the White House, right? Like, that's just an intergenerational cultural thing that has nothing to do with anything. That he is just so foot and mouth disease.
Totally.
Like, he's so work.
You know what? Yeah, he's like just odd. And I think his wife is trying to do a lot of damage control. Like, she came on an interview and was talking about how his comment was not geared towards women who can't have children.
I know.
Right.
And the implication was that it was geared towards women who don't want children. And I'm like, is this making it better? I feel like it's not.
I know.
I hate it.
You brought up in our back and forth that you mentioned wanting to discuss preparing yourself for the future, specifically like being financially aware and thinking and talking with your partner about your future through different life stages. Can you speak to us about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of make sure that just because you don't have children, you're not thinking about your future. Because when you have children, like, all you do is think about your future, right? Like, you're like, I have to save for this, I have to do this. And I'm not saying that child-free people don't think about their future, but I think it's really important to be intentional about what will retirement look like for us? What will being a widow or a widower look like for us? Like, how are we going to make sure that we are taken care of independently? And I don't just mean that like financially, like finances are a really big part of it, but also like building your community, making sure that you are not isolated, making sure that you have knowledge and awareness of, where will you live? Like healthcare decisions, right? Like thinking about like end of life care. If you don't really have like next of kin, then make sure you assign one. Like those type of things that are really uncomfortable to think about, and they're morbid and they're dark. And I say this advice to people with kids too, right? Like people with kids become so focused on their kids' future that they're not thinking about themselves, and they're just assuming their kids are going to take care of them when they're older. That doesn't always happen. So like, are you planning for yourself? Like, I think I would even zoom out and say everybody should think about how they're planning for themselves in the future for the later stages of their life financially. And I think having the financial freedom that not having children allows is really great, for sure. So making sure that you are just wise about how you're protecting yourself in the future is really important. And having candid conversations with your partner about these difficult things. especially around like healthcare decisions, end of life care, et cetera, et cetera. Like those things are really important. And sometimes we just don't want to talk about it, but I think we should talk about it. And I think that's like one of the things that I think this just comes from my own personal journey. Like in the beginning, like especially in my like late 20s, early 30s, like I just like never even thought about this stuff. And it's like really in the last 2-3 years where I'm like, you know what? All of my friends are pairing off. They're all having children. Like they're building their communities. Like, where do I fit in this? Right. Sometimes my husband jokes, like, he'll be like, yeah, at least we have like my nieces and nephews because they're older. Like, I don't have any nieces and nephews. And I'm like, but we can't just expect other people's children to be around, right? Like, we have to build our own community and our own nest egg and our own like 401 retirement fund that will continue to give us the freedom, even if we have like older age things like mobility issues or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Not fun to think about, but important. And I'll just say one last thing, that I think that, there's this stigma around child-free people that we just don't think about stuff in life, that we are this like, and I think I even said it to you earlier, like we're selfish and hedonistic and we live in the moment. And I really want to highlight that I genuinely believe that sometimes the people who don't have children have put more thought into why they're not doing it. They've discussed the pros and cons so much more than people who end up having kids. A lot of times people who have children are doing it because it's the next step and they want it and they've always wanted it and they've never questioned the why. And that's fine, right? Like that's how you're making your decisions and that's fine. But I think I want to break the stigma that child-free people don't think about shit, because we do. The hours that my husband and I have spent talking about this, if this is the right decision for us, how will we talk about it with our family? How are we going to respond when we go to these weddings? Like, is this the right thing for us to do? How are we building our community? Like, so much time has been spent on this. So it's not like we're just willy-nilly living our lives on a unicorn, just not thinking about real life things.
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly believe that child-free people think about it more than any other population.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. This has been such a phenomenal conversation. I know that I'm going to need to listen to this like 5 times. So we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And I know our listeners are going to take a lot away from this. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really needed to get this stuff off my chest. So I'm really glad that you invited me after I reached out to you and pitched myself. So I'm really glad to have had this conversation.
We are so glad to have you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Israa Nasir. I'm a therapist and the author of the upcoming book, Toxic Productivity, which is out for pre-order now. It comes out November 19th. If you get it before the November 19th date, you get a ton of freebies, bonus chapters, worksheets, reading guides, book club stuff, all of those good things. So please do get it. And I dinked myself by going on a 3-week vacation to Madeira, London, and Mallorca. It was amazing.
That's
oh
perfect.
My gosh.
Yes.
Iconic.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. Wow, what a great episode. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Dinky, as you know, is a podcast on the Spreaker Prime Network. Many thanks to Chloe Steinhoff-Smith for our podcast art, Leah Herder for creating our show's theme and interview transition music, and Vince Shortino for audio mixing and editing. Want to connect with us on social media? You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at DinkyPod. If you have a question or a comment, email us at dinky@dinkypod.com. If you're a fan of the show, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with friends.
I was going to jump in and say, people were asking us about resources for finding a child-free therapist, and I want to get that answer and put it in the show notes or something so that we can provide if she has any resources. So check out the show notes. If you guys are interested in a child-free therapist, I'll email Israa and try to get that info.
Suddenly, someone loves the fucking show notes. You're always a show notes hater. You're always like, who reads the show notes? Who looks at the show notes? Now look at you.
I actually do want to know who reads the show notes. But I think so many people were interested in this one question that we ran out of time for that I do wonder.
I was kind of
Somebody
hoping...
out there is going to look at the show notes.
I was kind of hoping that we would either invite her back to do a bonus episode about that specific topic, or we would bring her back another time for a full episode because people had so many fucking questions for her.
We always say that about bringing people back. Have we ever brought anybody back?
Well, whose fault is that?
Wow. Somehow that's my fault.
Yeah,
I
because
love
I
this
want to bring
dynamic.
Dr. Danny back so bad. Dr.
Dr.
Danielle.
Danny.
I call her Danny now.
Oh, I'm like, Danny Duncan? She's a doctor?
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, no, I would love Dr. Danielle back. And Dr. Allie.
Well, one of them has a kid now, so axed.
You know, Allie listens. She listens a lot.
Allie?
Yeah, she listens a lot. Yeah, she texts me I just texted her. I was just texting with her yesterday. Yeah. She listens all the time. She was like, I was listening to the episode and I wanted to know what vitamin C serum you recommended. She just texted me that.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, does Dr. Danielle
Do you take it back?
Dr. Danielle listen?
Yeah, she listens too because she texted me.
I was going to say, maybe we only have Dr. Allie back. No, but I specifically, people have been asking questions that I think Dr. Danielle specifically could answer. So Allie's welcome to come. I love her. But I just want to clarify, that's the reason I said Dr. Danielle. No shade to Dr. Allie.
Got it. Okay. That sounds great. And we're also going to get Mrs. Mikey Garcia and Sapphire Sandalo back for our Halloween episode.
See? What the fuck is your problem?
We just haven't done it yet.
We've only been doing this show for 2 years.
We've been doing this for 2 years and we've never brought anybody back yet. Okay, anyway, keep going.
Visit the show notes to shop merch. Actually, no.
Merch?
Merch is going to be gone. Merch is going to be gone by the time this episode comes out.
Merch is probably gone.
But you know what?
What?
We should have our Amazon storefront. We got to get some things going on there by the episode before this.
That's a you thing. That's a thing
ready.
for you.
I just need you to send me your backpack. But by the time this comes out, the storefront, the backpack that you used for Scotland.
Traveling?
Mm-hmm. We're going to put those in. We talked about that in the previous episode, so those are going to be in there. So by the time this comes out, who knows what's going to be on our storefront? All of our favorite fucking products.
But I do want to say we might reopen the store again closer to Christmas. So if there's anything you want to get a dinky friend for the Christmas holiday times, that'll be your next window.
Wow, an exclusive. I didn't even know about this.
You've heard it here first.
Yeah, I heard it here literally right now for the first time.
Yep.
Donate to the show. Who knows when we're going to launch our Patreon? Maybe that will be in the show notes. Basically, just fucking visit the show notes, you guys. What are you waiting for? You know what? I'm probably going to put my social security number in the show notes.
My bank account information is going to be in the show notes.
Yeah. There's going to be a link where I'm going to funnel you $1 million in the show notes. Mm-hmm. So if you want $1 million, go find that link in the show notes.
Yeah, if you want Kristen to donate to all your GoFundMes, DM me, put in the show notes. I need to create a GoFundMe just to get some money from Kristen. I literally just got an update on my email about a GoFundMe I sent money to like a year ago. They just provided an update.
Wait, I need to know. Wait, do you have a minute to talk? Are these just random GoFundMes? Are you just browsing GoFundMe?
Sometimes they're friends, but most of them are random.
Wait, yeah. But how are you finding them?
I'm not going to GoFundMe.com and browsing, I promise. But it's like TikTok or Instagram or whatever serves me something. I
don't know what's wrong with me. I believe 80% of the time these GoFundMe's just random ones. I believe that they're just fake. Every time I see a TikTok GoFundMe, I'm like, you're lying.
Oh, see, that's the difference between me and you. I believe everything and everyone.
And see, that's why you like Reddit, and I'm always like, Reddit is a scam. These people are making up these stories.
Wow. I mean, some of them, of course, some of them are definitely made up on Reddit for sure. But I do think that's really funny, and that's why we make such good business partners, because I have heart and you have mind, and together we are heart and mind.
Wow, incredible. All right, listeners, that's all you get. Goodbye.
Dink life.